The flames swallowed his home before dawn. By sunrise, nothing stood but ash and a hollow silence. And while neighbors whispered in shock, the man who had lost everything walked into court, only to see the very woman who burned his house standing just a few feet away, smirking as if justice could never touch her. The fire began before the city stirred awake. Smoke coiled against the night sky, painting it with an orange glow that spread like a warning. Neighbors watched helplessly as a man's home, his sanctuary, his memories, his life's work, collapsed into ash. He stood still, his body outlined by the flames, his face unreadable. He neither shouted nor wept. Silence wrapped around him like armor. This was Marcus, a decorated veteran who had returned home years earlier with scars invisible to most, but heavy in every step he took. His house wasn't just brick and wood. It was the only place where his late wife's voice still echoed in framed photographs, the only place where his children's laughter had once lived. And now it was gone, erased in a single night. The authorities would discover what the neighbors already whispered. This was no accident. It was deliberate, and the name on every tongue was hers. Karen, the self-proclaimed enforcer of the neighborhood association. She had called him out before, about his lawn, about his guests, about the very existence of his life in a space she claimed should be kept clean. But few believed she would go so far. Marcus said nothing. He gave no speech of rage, no cry for vengeance. He simply stood among the ashes, the acrid smoke clinging to his skin, and watched his world burn. Days later, in the sterile silence of the courtroom, Marcus entered. His steps were slow but unbroken. He wore no uniform, yet carried himself with the same quiet dignity of a soldier on parade. He did not glance at the spectators or the murmuring crowd. His eyes only found her. Karen sat just feet away, her chin lifted in defiance. She wore arrogance like perfume, believing rules bent in her favor. She had laughed when questioned by officers, scoffed when neighbors spoke of the fire, and whispered that no jury would ever take the word of a man like him over hers. The room held its breath. Judges and lawyers exchanged formalities, but the deeper story was carved into every face present. Here was a man who had given everything to his country, only to return home and be treated as an outsider. Here was a woman who believed power came not from truth, but from her ability to manipulate silence. But silence was Marcus's strength. He sat without movement, every gesture precise, every blink controlled. He did not defend himself with angry words, but with an unshakable stillness that unsettled even those who doubted him. His silence carried weight, as though behind it were legions of fallen comrades standing invisible but present. The trial began. Witnesses spoke of late-night arguments, of threats whispered under porch lights, of papers filed to the association demanding Marcus's removal. Each testimony stacked like bricks against Karen. Still, she smirked. Still she leaned back in her chair, convinced her shield of privilege would not crack. And then came the moment that shifted everything. The firefighter who had pulled Marcus back from the collapsing frame of his house described the smell of gasoline traced along the siding. Investigators held up photographs, sharp, undeniable, damning. The smirk on Karen's face faltered. For the first time, her hands twitched, restless against the polished wood of the table. Marcus never turned toward her. He did not need to. His strength was not in confrontation, but in presence. In that silence, he spoke a truth louder than any words. I will not break. I will not answer hate with hate. The room changed. People who had once avoided his gaze now watched him with respect. The same neighbors who had whispered in doubt now whispered something else. Shame, perhaps, or admiration. And when the verdict came, when the gavel struck with finality, Karen's face drained of color. Justice had spoken, but more powerful than the verdict was the sight of Marcus rising to his feet. No cheer escaped his lips, no words of triumph. He simply stood tall, his back straight, his head steady. The silence itself was victory. Later, outside those courthouse doors, strangers nodded in quiet respect. Some placed a hand over their chest, others simply stepped aside to let him walk past first. It was not celebration. It was something purer, recognition. 3 lines would echo in the hearts of all who witnessed it. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength. Dignity cannot be burned to the ground. Respect is earned in the shadows of suffering. And as Marcus walked away, leaving behind the ashes of his home and the echoes of injustice. The crowd knew they had seen something rare, not revenge, not anger, but honor. For in the end, true power is not in those who shout the loudest, but in those who stand unshaken when the world tries to silence them. And so, in a world too often quick to judge and slow to listen, Marcus reminds us that strength is not always loud, and justice is not always swift, but dignity, once earned, can never be taken away. Where are you watching this story from? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that honor silent heroes whose strength deserves to be remembered.